Welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. So this is Tuesdays around 9:10, actually, just after Holby City. We're going to carry on, actually, looking at some of the greatest games of Garry Kasparov. So I've got three absolutely amazing. Let's mute this. I've got three absolutely amazing games to show you tonight of Kasparov, and I'm sweating a bit. This is actually a very, very hot day in the UK, but that aside, okay, let's see. So this was played in Kasparov's hometown, Baku, in 1980. It was against Sicilian. Now I'm just going to check, is there a pronunciation help on Sicilian? I think it might be Sicilian, actually. Let's get pronunciation from chessgames.com.
Tom Istvan.
I got that completely wrong, didn't I? I got that spectacularly wrong. In fact, it seems Annie Kate on chessgames.com says the other way. Let's say that again.
Tom Istvan.
Chom Istvan? Really?
Tom Istvan.
Exactly. Sometimes you need pronunciation help. Anyway, so he was born in a place which looks incredibly difficult to pronounce. Sataladheli. I don't know exactly. Okay. Awarded the IM title in 1967 and the GM title in 1973. He was the Hungarian champion in 1972 and 73 jointly. His tournament victories included Olot 1973, Cleveland 1975, and several others. So quite an established player. Check out Wiki for more details. So let's have a look at this game. D4 from Kasparov, and we have Knight F6, C4. E6, and now Kasparov plays Knight C3. He doesn't mind the Nimzo engine defense. This pin, Bishop B4, he's not minding this. We have the Rubinstein variation, which is E3. I'm just going to connect to Livebook as well, because I think E3 is actually one of the more popular moves. It is stood the test of time as the most popular move, it seems, overall, and Queen C2 is second, Knight F3 third, but E3 is like one of the most respectable moves, basically. Let's also add a Kapitsa here. I'm going to add threats for the moment. We might need help in Endgames from other engines, but let's get that. Let's get on with this so far. So C5, Knight GE2, which of course means there doesn't have to be structural damage now. On C5, probably that is one of the most popular moves, but often Bishop D3 is played as well. So second most popular, Knight GE2. Black takes. Yes, this is a main book at the moment for this line. Now quite often Knight F4 is being played here, but also D5 is equally popular. Takes, Rook E8. And here D6 has been seen quite a few times before, this forcing move D6, but Kasparov in this game plays slightly rarer G3, which means actually the bishop can occupy a seemingly dangerous diagonal, which it does, Bishop C5. So it's because D6 hasn't been played, this bishop's getting out on what seems to be a dangerous diagonal. And is black actually threatening anything? Well, actually, you know, Knight G4, if black had done on the move, Knight G4 would be a wipeout. But Bishop G2, no panic. Because I think Knight G4, white can just castle, actually, just castle there. That's fine, no panic here. D6. And in fact, the whole Knight G4 is stopped now with H3, as well as any Bishop G4. Okay, so Bishop F5 is played. And this does trigger memories, this game, I'm pretty sure I've talked about this game before, and I've also read about this game as well at certain points. And there's just a very, very nice feel to White's play on the king side. Just intuitively, we're going to see now White castling. And it also reminds me actually of a special Anatoly Karpov game I saw, when sometimes you have the fianchettoed bishop, you can sometimes grab space on the king side, and aesthetically that feels kind of great, as long as you're not creating too many weaknesses. And here, in fact, after knight bd7, there's a move designed to gain space here, quite a bit of space. Can you guess, although it looks maybe controversial, maybe you wouldn't think of it, but I've given you enough clues. White's play, is anyone awake on stream yet? I'm going to say in a few seconds, or on Play Chess. Oh, try and hide the score sheet if you're on Play Chess, by the way, so I can do the guess the moves with you. So White play. It's okay. White. Yeah, any ideas what White plays? Yeah, g4, just g4. Not fearing a piece sack. I'm not sure any piece sack is that sound. It might be tempting to take and then try and get queen h4 in. I'm not sure this will work very well. Bishop takes g4. Let's have a look. It wasn't played, but let's say the bishop actually went here. But let's say bishop g4 for a moment. If black really has the threat of queen h4, it's dangerous. But bishop f4 just safeguards h2. No problem. Let's just rule that one out. There's no problem there. So can't easily exploit this. If the bishop drops back here, that's one of like the engine suggestions. But actually in this game we see bishop e4. So trying to get rid of White's light square bishop. And also of course tempting is knight takes e4. But Kasparov didn't do that. If knight takes e4, although it's tempting to get the light square bishop, black actually might be significantly doing very well here in this particular position with the threat of knight takes f2. This is actually kind of dangerous and is not liked at all by at least Fritz here, because as an example, queen c2, knight takes f2 is a bomb blast here. Sorry, I better not use that expression in the modern times. Pardon me. Knight takes f2 is a piece sacrifice. Let's try and... yeah, okay, so rook takes f2. Queen h4 is strong here. Queen h4 is strong here. I mean, this is just troublesome. How does White actually defend f2? I mean, so it's dangerous to take on e4 because it kind of develops this even more significant pressure on f2. Bishop takes e4. I don't think it does. It just looks terrible. Knight takes e4. It just looks terrible. So we see instead knight g3, and with the exchange of bishops, White is actually kind of comfortable here, even though you might think his light squares are weakened. He's actually unpinned the f2 pawn now, of course, from that bishop. And White is also threatening g5 here, winning a piece right now, because h5 is adequately covered, e4 is adequately covered. So g5 is actually the threat here to address for black. Here, against g5, we have this knight making space on d7 for the possibility of g5, which happens anyway. The knight goes back to d7. Okay, how can White actually develop this position? Well, he carries on gaining space, and I think this, for me, is aesthetically pleasing. It does remind me of this book I have about beginner to master or something. Anyway, it had a Karpov game illustrative with knight g3 and Karpov squeezing on the king side. And yeah, there's something aesthetic about this. But yeah, you might think, well, hang on, there's a bit of a vacuum with the absence of the light square bishop. Nevertheless, let's see. Knight e5 was played here. So black is teasing on f4. Come and get me with f4. F4 might actually be a reasonable move, but Kasparov plays h5 with the possibility of f4 coming up. And now actually we get f6. This might not be the greatest move for black's king safety. I mean, there's alternatives: queen c8, queen d7. So that if f4, for example, there might be knight g4. But even here, you know, white's doing great with this line. Just to give one example, white would be doing fine here. The aesthetics of squeezing on the king side. Actually, there's also some concrete threats. It's comfortable for white. So, yeah, it's already white's significantly better before this f6 was played. Now the pressure is built on f6 with knight ce4. So we have now f takes g5, bishop takes g5. And you can feel the undermining possibilities here with h6 to undermine f6. But first the queen must move. The queen moves to b6. And now, yeah, the squares are undermined. The dark squares are undermined with h6. That fawn pawn, my favourite fawn pawn, has arrived. This has won so many games on blitz, etc. The fawn pawn is there. It's doing a lot of damage in this position, even if it doesn't remain. If it gets exchanged, if it exchanges on g7, we're going to fragment and remove some of the king's defenders, leaving a poor isolated h-pawn. We have here knight f7. It's a very difficult position. H takes g7, and we've got a very dangerous pawn near black's king. Very dangerous fawn pawn. Black dare not take this pawn here. He actually plays knight d7. Let's see if he took. If black took, it's a massive advantage for white with knight f5 check. And this is just horrible, you know. Bishop f6, for example, queen g4 check, rook h1, and I think there's threats like rook takes h7 now in this position, mating threats. It's just terrible. Black would have to try and give up material just to stay on the board. It's unpalatable, that line, completely unpalatable, and I don't think king g8 improves things either. Knight f6 check, queen h5, it's unpalatable, this pressure, this position here. Threatening mate or g7, this is unpalatable. Black would have to give up material. So best to leave that pawn there, even though it is a fawn in black's king, just right in front of black's king. Knight d7, check, knight takes, bishop takes. Okay, this is a disaster. This position represents a disaster really for black. This is just massively in white's favor. In fact, you know, this isolated pawn is made worse that there's an open row to it on the h file, potentially. Just to torture that pawn, that poor isolated pawn. Its friends have gone and it's by itself, and there's also this massive road to gain access to it, the h file here. The bishop's also, of course, defending b2 here from the queen. Black's not really threatening anything. It seems this has gone horribly wrong. But anyway, black played queen b5 here, with the idea maybe of playing something like this, or bishop b6, to try and maybe, I don't know, it seems too slow, queen b5. So we have this road torturing the h-pawn already. Immediate threats include queen c2. Okay, we have bishop b6. And in fact here, one of the points is revealed with bishop c5, that actually the queen's tying down this queen to d5. Sneaky, very sneaky. So queen c2 is kind of ruled out, one would think. Kasparov's move is queen f3, keeping hold of d5 and also making way for maybe a rook sack, you know, to bring this rook in to eliminate that pawn. If let's have a quick look. Queen c2. I think it is ruled out, or is it? Even this, Fritz likes white. After f3, Fritz really likes white here. So we've got this threat. If h6, knight f5, it's really kind of liked for white, this position. It shows how strong the position is, really. This is a strong position. Anyway, this is in white's favour. But I think Kasparov's move is actually stronger, just holding on. This is one of the strongest moves. And in fact, I mean, I was just kind of saying that for a fact, that something like rook h7. It turns out, you know, in fact, in this position, rook. Do you? Okay, let's do a yes though. Do you think intuitively? Okay, I'll say this. Do you think intuitively, rook takes h7 is possible? Do you think it's intuitively possible to play this? I'm going to have to get another engine to check this. I want to do a sanity check on this position. I wonder if I'm going to crash my system if I load another kibitzer at the same time. I'm going to add another kibitzer at the same time, so we've got an audience of engines for this position. Okay. Oh, here goes the broadcast. Oh no, let's put that roundabout here. Let's have two engines here. They got the same conclusion, really. They got the same conclusion. Let's turn that one off before I crash my system. Pardon me. Do you think rook takes h7 is possible? This is interesting. Interesting. Okay, rook takes h7. It does seem this might have been possible. Now, not with the idea of queen h5 check, although that's strong as well. There's an even stronger approach here. Queen h8. This is just leading to a mate. If knight h6, a bit more stubborn. Rook h1. This is just. It's possible even to play either queen f3 apparently, or queen takes, even letting this pawn go. Here we're covering d2, yeah? Knight e4. Threatening queen h7 now, guarding that. And if check, black's running out checks. Well, that's desperate, we could just take that. So this is hopeless because white is threatening check and then queening with check. You know, a token move is an example. You know, check and then g8. So it's impossible to do anything about it, it seems. So that is crushing. That is crushing, even if you let d5 go. But apparently, even better is actually just queen f3 here. Sorry, even better after rook takes h7, just play queen f3 as well is really strong. Actually, I'm not even sure even better. Queen f3 with the idea of g8 and then queen g4 check. If g8 immediately, then there's rook takes g8. But if you play queen f3, black I think might be helpless here. Let's just do this. g8. If rook takes there, then check is crushing. It's all over. That's quite a versatile move. That is really just crushing stuff. So anyway, yeah, it does seem rook takes h7, believe it or not, was possible and spectacular. But Kasparov doesn't need to take that risk even. I mean, his position is really strong. It seems both queen f3 and queen h5 check are just winning here. Yeah. Okay, but okay, we get instead queen f3, still keeping all things in reserve. And in fact, so this is in reserve. What have I done here? Interesting. I've split something. Okay, anyway, I'll just ignore that. Knight e5 was played, hitting the queen. But this doesn't help black. This doesn't help black because there is a fantastic looking move in this position. So white is holding by his d pawn, and there's a fantastic move here which is absolutely crushing. It spells the total disaster for black. This is move 28. Total disaster. White's play. Can you find a really crushing move here using the fawn pawn, actually, which is heaven for tactical opportunities as far as I can see from any games I look at, from any of my own games, from any of my post-mortems. If you've got fawn pawns, you've got this wealth of tactical ideas and resources, and this is no exception here after knight e5. Can you see what white could play here? 20 seconds? Yeah, 100 points if you can get it. Some of you might be on the right track. Yeah, knight f5. Yeah, massive threat of knight h6. The knight's just created a weakness of the last move. It's done the trade-off. It's attacked the queen, but traded off its protection of the h6 square. That was not an ideal move. Now knight h6 is threatened. You know, takes. We have knight h6. It was very juicy, exceptionally juicy checkmate. So yeah, black puts the knight back. And actually, this rewinding of moves, you might see that in the other two games I'm going to show you later. Kasparov gets the opponent to sort of take back their own moves. Yeah, it's just horrible. Yeah, that's been forced back. And now it's much clearer of the queen protecting d5. Some of the ideas from earlier still are in the position. This poor lonesome h7 pawn. So guess what white play? I'm sure you can all guess this, right? For 200 points. And it's the final move of the game. And of course we're going to analyze it just to make sure. But white plays what here? Anyone wanting 200 points? I guess the final move of the game at move 29. Okay, rook takes h7 is now completely on. It's actually a forced mate in 5 against any defense. Any defense, it's a forced mate in 5. So if king takes, check. If king here, rook h8 is a mate in 3. Sorry, not there. Queen g7. I was thinking of the wrong queen. Sorry, I had queen g7. I had queen h5. It meant this queen for a mate in 1. We can use that one. No, there's no defense here. There's no defense. If knight h6, rook takes h6. If here, well, we can't take that. That's an illegal move. Check, knight takes d6, and then queen f5 checkmate. There's just no defense to this very logical move. And yes, so I've seen this game before, and it did make an impression on me. And I think I tried to emulate it in some of my games, and sometimes it worked. But often it is a little bit double-edged when you start to use your kingside pawns to attack the opponent's king. But here it worked amazingly well. It's interesting, you know, one aspect of this game was, if we looked at from a theoretical point of view, the move d6 was very popular. so that bishop wasn't popping out here. Maybe Kasparov felt that as part of his preparation, that when you've got the bishop over here, fine, it points at f2, but it's taken away from the kingside defense something. So maybe it more justified White's later avalanche, you know, scenario. It's like an avalanche of, you know, on the king side. It's just very neat aesthetics to this particular game, as far as I can see. What about you guys? Do you feel that aesthetically? This was a neat game. I think it was a very neat game. Okay. So we'll go on to another game now. So game 2, I'd like to show you game 2 of this evening's selection, and these are great games. These are really amazing games. This is in 1980. So this one against Marjanovic. Let's load this in, and here we go. It was played in Malta. Okay, 1980. Kasparov against Marjanovic. And is there any bio on Marjanovic? Slevloj. No, no, there's no pronunciation help. Slavlub Marjanovic was born in Lenik, Yugoslavia, awarded IM title in 1977, GM title in 1978, Yugoslav champion in 1985. In tournaments he was first at Belgrade 1979, first at Bor 1983, and yeah, some other great tournament victories. He also played on the Yugoslav Olympiad team in 1984. Marjanovic is also a FIDE senior trainer. Let's have a look. D4 from Kasparov. We have knight f6, c4, e6, and now we get another flavour. Instead of the Nimzo engine, we get a close relative knight f3. It's going into Queen's engine territory. b6. Kasparov plays g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, bishop e7, and these positions are really can be great fun, it seems, because there's something very, very interesting and dynamic about to happen here. Although black's trying to exert a lock and key over key central squares with the bishop and knight, white is very rebellious here about this and kind of tries to aggressively liberate his pieces in this position. This might not be the main move. The main move, knight c3, but Kasparov's move, can you guess white's play? What's kind of a really aggressive move which might not be the main sort of move played over the centuries? What do you think Kasparov plays in this position? Any ideas? Just from a theoretical point of view. It's the third most popular, apparently. Third most popular move in Livebook. It's an aggressive idea that exists in these kind of situations where you've got the bishops seemingly staring at each other from across the board. An aggressive, dynamic idea worth adding to your aggressive repertoire. d5. It's a disruptive pawn sacrifice. We have e takes d5, and now Kasparov uses this pin with knight h4 pinning that pawn, and knight f5 is looking scary for black. Now black here plays c6. We have c takes d. Knight takes d5 is the main move played. Knight f5. Knight goes back, which means black is preparing for things like d5 and knight e6, and saying to white, you know, where is your compensation for this pawn? You've just sacked a pawn. All you've got so far is this knight on f5, but it is one of Kasparov's favourite places for a knight a knight on f5. We have here the move knight c3. We have d5. And now again, another really aggressive move, e4. White is potentially threatening a nasty tactic involving d5 in this position. Let's just show this up. Suppose black played a6. I'm pretty sure that a nasty tactic exists. That's possible. That's possible. It's possible, and it's a slight advantage to white. If it takes, then we've got 97 winning, and if it doesn't, same as the rook. It's slightly better for white. So there is some pressure. I'm just giving a6 as a token move to see that there's pressure on d5 already, with the knight exerting an influence tactically in this position. It's not just a pretty knight, it's doing something. So we have here the move bishop f6, which might be one of the better moves. It's safeguarding that bishop tactically to this kind of stuff, and black does seem to have reinforced d5 surely enough. We have e takes d, c takes d, and now bishop f4. And in fact, even though white's a pawn down, there are threats to address. Bishop takes now, and knight takes d5 is on the cards. So black tries to defend against that one, and it's looking slightly awkward here. Now we have rook e1, and there's the possibility of things like knight d6 in the air here. We have queen d7. This might be a slight mistake. This might not have been the most accurate move. On the other hand, it's it's what the engine suggests. Now I say that because it seems a little bit surprising that this might be one of the better moves in this position, because doesn't it walk into literally bishop h3, threatening crudely to win the queen? Of course it does, but it was at this point that maybe black could play something like knight e6 and nearly be okay, but I'm not convinced. This is dangerous stuff for black. He plays actually king h8 against knight h6, but things go bad here. Things start to go south badly in this position. White has released that pressure on that pin for sure, but there's another pin there on that pawn in a way. So even though this bishop's relinquished one pin, white's still got another pin on that pawn, and uses that with this next move now, which is very, very dangerous move. Can you see white's play here? What does white play in this position? Yeah, he makes use of that loose queen. It's not protected by anything, right? And this pin, he plays knight e4, so threatening to damage black's structure and not minding giving up the pawn. This probably hastens to the end taking the pawn, but it was played. It's difficult to suggest what black should do. If he steps back, knight takes is dangerous. Knight g5 hitting the queen. This position threatening mate. This position, we've got this knight hanging. Hang on a sec. That's protected by that rook e7. And now it's dangerous for black. What if he does this? Sorry, what if he does what I meant to say? What if he does this? Well, then we could just take. Ouch. So that's just winning material. Bishop c8, that's protecting that, so we can just take here. That's not a good line. That line was with bishop e7. That's not a good line. This looks just horrific. because it's allowing those doubled pawns, but maybe it's one of black's better choices, but it looks pretty horrific. And yeah, white's just a bit better. White's clearly better. But in the game we have this materialistic bishop takes b2. White could play this first, but actually what he does, he's just going for the throat here. He puts both knights really aggressively near black's king, super aggressive. And I've got to say, there's an aesthetic to this game as well. And I do remember, I'm not just saying this, I do remember the aesthetic pleasure I got from each of the 3 games I'm showing you tonight. I've seen them before, and they all triggered something in my head about, you know, the intuition of attacking play. I mean, seriously, if you sort of hang some knights, not hang knights as in give up knights, I mean put knights close to the opponent's king like this on the 5th rank, they're aggressive, mean looking knights. Now, one basic question, you know, what if takes? Black played queen c6. What if takes? Let's just rule that out. White doesn't bother with queen takes because there's d4 anyway, shutting the diagonal. White actually has queen h5 here, wrestling mate. If h6, bang, the knights are working very well together. It's very destructive. You know, if takes here, we're just going to mate, right? And if doesn't take, then it doesn't matter because we're just going to dismantle black with discovered and double check. Check. There's a mate in 4 here, believe it or not. Knight e4 check. We can also take the queen, of course. Knight e5 check. Oh, this is pretty. If here we take the queen mate, and otherwise it's like mating anyway. Yeah, so it's a bad idea to take on a1. Essentially, it's not the best defensive idea. Apparently, to take on a1, this is just killing because there's no defensive knights around. These knights are over here, and these knights are over here. Now, hold on. We know Kasparov is a brilliant calculator, but also we can just see intuitively with our eyes that what are all these pieces doing over here away from the king? They're like miles away, these knights, and we've got these aggressive knights here. Contrast the knights, it's just hopeless. You don't even need to calculate this in a way. There's so many pieces around black's king. Yeah, forget bishop takes a1. That was just for fun. I was showing you bishop takes a1. It's not a serious defensive try. You cannot be serious with bishop takes a1. Queen c6 was played in the game, but let's have a look at knight e6 for a moment. That's more challenging. In fact, I don't even trust Fritz with this position. I don't want to get this wrong. I want to show you some fantastic resources. Let me just check with Houdini in this position. There might be something spectacular. I don't want to miss it. So at the risk of my fan noise going up massively, I'm not mistaken on that. I'm gutted at the same time. Why aren't I using Houdini? It doesn't seem that loud. I think it crashed the system once, but it's found the move. It's found a brilliant move, which I'll give you 500 points if you can find. There is a brilliant move alert here for this defense. I'll give you 500 points, but I'm just going to do a cross check again just for sanity. No, they both come to the same conclusion. Yeah, they both come to the same conclusion. It's a brute forcey position. They can come to the same conclusion here about this next move if it was this position. White's playing and crush. Not rook takes e6. Actually, you might not get this. You might not get this. No, I don't think I'm going to get this move. I have cynicism that anyone is going to get this. I would have to give you a clue to make you see the resources from a particular angle, camera angle. Otherwise you're not going to see the resource that the engines find. I can only give you an intuitive clue here that sometimes if you're Mikhail Tal, you go through Tal's games and he's stripping away all the pawns around the opponent's king in his combinations. That's the undertone. But here there's also another message. Sometimes you don't need to strip away all the pawns, you just need to fragment them. Fragment the pawns around the opponent's king, the skin around the king. You need to remove it completely, you know, take away the skin like Tal did, or you can fragment those pawns and then look for the tactical resources after the fragmentation. How can we fragment those 3 pawns? They're all together as a unit, protecting each other, cozy, non-isolated. How can we fragment those pawns? And why would that be significant? I'm wondering why it's significant myself. Now, okay, if we went all in, let's go all in with Queen H5, right? Black actually just plays Knight takes G5 and rescues the situation, yeah? So that's not happening. In fact, Black can survive this apparently. But there turns out to be a better way of doing this by first fragmenting the pawns. So you know, you'd rather defragment it sometimes for your hard disk if you're a nerd, a computer nerd, or maybe just everyone does defragmenting now. What used to be nerd territory is mainstream now. I mean, the internet was once a nerdy place, yeah. But anyway, and now everyone's using it. So anyway, no. Coming back anyway, the point is you want to defragment the opponent's king safety, and it seems Knight takes G7 does this for some reason. So why 500 points we found this. So Knight takes G5 here, we just take the queen, right, because that's pinned. Okay, bishop takes G7, queen H5 here, H6. Oh, there's a great move here. Well, there's 2 great moves, but one of them is bishop E5, threatening queen takes H6. And if here we can take, and we've got a full view on H6. And we're threatening queen takes H6, and this is just murderous. Black would have to give up the queen. Now, that kind of operation, why? Let's try and ascertain, just intuitively, why fragmenting the pawns. Why couldn't we do this again? I said Knight takes G5. We haven't got the bleeding pin, have we? On the bleeding knight on E6. So not only it's fragmenting the pawns, bonus points, it's created a pin, which means Queen H5 is a lot stronger than it ever was. And if, how many ways can we take this? So takes, I mentioned we just take the queen. And I mentioned bishop takes. And what about king takes? We just go all in with queen H5. We've got that pin. Go for H7. And here, how does black defend? Say he does this. Knight E6. Queen H6. Bishop E6. We're winning that queen. It's enough even just to win the queen. And that's a mate in 6 as well. Just taking the queen. So it seems Knight takes G7 is multi-purpose. Actually. It's got bonus points to it. So this was on the move Knight E6. We're still looking at this defense Knight E6, which wasn't even played, but it's fascinating. So Knight takes G7, fascinatingly, has bonus points. It's A, creating that pin to make Queen H5 more effective. B, it's fragmenting the pawns at the same time, which means, you know, it's more difficult sometimes to defend the king. This is just crushing. There's no defense here. So anyway, this rules out basically knight e6. It's kind of ruled out because of knight takes g7. What about f6? Knight e7 here apparently is strong, hitting the queen. It's protected by the knight. Black would be forced apparently into a queen sack for dear life. If the queen moves, then knight takes h7, for example. This is horrendous apparently. If takes, check. We're just going to mate here on h7 soon. f6 is not really helping matters. The key move seems to be knight e7 here, after which black would be forced to a desperate queen sack. This is the best move apparently. If black's forced in this desperate queen sack, we still bring our attention to h7, that soft spot. Bang, bishop takes h7, for example. Check. This is just crushing. This is just crushing. It's winning for white. So anyway, we'll go back to the main game continuation here. But it was fun to check out those defenses. I thought so anyway. So in the main game continuation back here with the two knights super aggressive, black, I can't resist to say that there's bishop c8 as well as a defensive try. Let's just have a look at this one for a bit more completeness. Bishop c8. There's rook e7 here. This is apparently quite crushing. Knight takes f7. This position here is quite crushing. We're threatening mate. If black tries to defend the back row, knight d4 is a nasty pin. So black does this to defend f8. This is again a crushing position. It just seems, yeah, white's swarming his pieces around the king here. Say bishop d7. Knight e7 threatens the queen. I don't know, say the queen moves somewhere. We just get the king to ourselves. Yeah, it's just hopeless. So basically, okay, now we're really going to go to the game continuation. Black played queen c6. Queen c6, which does allow this forcing move, knight e7, but the queen has now got f6, which is used, which might not be the best, but let's just go with it. Queen f6. Now here there's another horrible forcing move, which is based on the idea that the knight is covering escape squares of the king. The two knights are working really well together here to either fragment in some cases the skin around the king or just remove certain parts of that defensive skin. But here, no, there's a killer blow in this position which is played, and it's forcing at the same time. It's got the perk. It's a forcing move, relatively forcing move, not an absolute one like check. It's a relatively strong forcing move which removes key defense around the opponent's king here. So white's play here. What does white play here for 200 points? Okay, knight takes h7, removes a key defense around the king. If king takes, then we have, this is like mating, queen h5, and bishop f5, and bishop takes h6 is going to be mating, yeah? So this is making use of the queen and the knight together, getting rid of all the escape squares. If you said bishop e5, I'm not sure about that. Bishop takes e5 is possible. Black is winning now, apparently. So knight takes h7 is the key move here. It removes king safety. It's forcing at the same time. It's got some, major benefits. Okay, so queen d4 was played, but now the queen does park on h5 beautifully. It's direct. How comes we don't get chess like this nowadays? Why is this like the music we have? Why is all the music from the 70s and 80s so brilliant compared to all the rubbish today? The same thing. I don't know what's happened to creativity. I've no idea, both in music and chess, what's happened to creativity. Does anyone know? I don't know. Why don't we get games like this that much nowadays? But anyway, sorry about the whining. So queen h5. It's just wonderful. Okay. Maybe there's just so many super GMs nowadays. They're all equally matched or something. Yeah. So anyway, queen h5. No, to be fair, I think Kasparov was such a volcano erupting, up the rating, crushing everyone up the rating ladder, destroying everyone. Huge preparation advantage. He was one of the pioneers of chess space. He had a huge preparation advantage, theoretically, over people as well, compared to the day. Yeah, it's a little bit unfair to say things like that. Okay, so black played black played g6 here. This is actually a forced mate in 10 now, and Kasparov starts off the forced mate in 10 with queen h4. Black is just getting mated by force in this position. We're going to forget the computer defenses, queen f4 and queen f2. We're going to see what was played, which shortcuts it to a mate in 3. So the mate in 3, I don't know, do you guys want to be tested on a mate in 3? White's mate in 3, technical exercise here. So what is the mate in 3? Actually, there's 2 different mates in 3, at least 2. There's probably more, actually. Is there more? There's a mate in 4. No, there's 2 mates in 3. There's a mate in 4. So let's look at the 2 mates in 3. Anyone? Anyone want to guess? The mate in 3? One of the mates in 3? Can you see the whole mate in 3? Anyone? Whole mate in 3? You should be able to. Come on. I'm going to start playing it out. So give yourself 500 points if you do see the mate in 3. It starts with the check. There's only really one move. This is not the most amazing calculation needed. There's only one move for this magic trick of calculation here. And now there's 2 moves which deliver a mate in 2, in fact. So it's a mate in 2 in at least 2 ways. Yeah, in at least 2 ways. There's a mate in 2 here after king g7. Can you see the mate in 2? Say the mate in 2 if you want. Mate in 2. I'm not sure about bishop h6. That's not one of the mate in 2s actually. It's a mate in 3. That's pretty good as well though. It just transposes into the mate in 2 actually. It's a bit of a waste of time. No, the mate in 2 is queen h6, forcing the king here, and then bishop g5. But there was also another mate in 2 with knight f5 check as well, fascinatingly. After g takes, we have queen h6 checkmate. So there's 2 mate in 2s there. So anyway, so this game made a great impression when I first saw it, and I'm pretty sure I've gone over it at some point. It's another great one because actually there's been a number of games in the Queen's Indian defence where white's done that central pawn sack, and it just causes a lot of disruption for black. Black's trying to cling on to this extra pawn, but all these pieces are now not defending the king, and this is a vivid demonstration of you getting 2 really super aggressive knights, and the opponent's knights are super defensive, and this is what can happen. So there is an aesthetic, a unique aesthetic to this game, I would say. I don't, for that particular theme, you know, I think this is kind of a unique and aesthetically pleasing game. The game didn't end with the checkmate, by the way. The game ended with I think queen h4. Let me just check the original score sheet. The game ended, sorry, on 23 bishop, on 23 knight f6 check. Black resigned here. Yeah, he didn't want to play the checkmate out. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun stuff, you know. It's direct. It's a sweet game. It's only 24 moves. It's an ideal game, you know. It's for checking out. For, you know. Okay, so let's go on to another one. Hope you enjoyed that one. That's been in many people's collections actually at chessgames.com as well. Highly collected game, that one, and so is the other 2 that I'm showing you. But so I didn't just stop the stream, did I? Hi there. I hope I didn't just interrupt the stream for the third game. I pressed something I shouldn't have. Please tell me the stream's still going. Okay. Actually, I had them in slightly the wrong order that I was originally intending to show. Oh yeah, this is a great one. Kasparov himself has talked about this game as well in his multi-volume. He's done a multi-volume thing about his, you know, career path. So this was definitely one of his noted like career path games. And the way he annotated this was there was a very central, very clear central theme to this one as well. And what fascinates me is okay, it's Kasparov against Joseph Preble. Now let me see if there's pronunciation help. Nope, there isn't. Joseph Preble, I have no idea, is international master, 68 years old, still around. The Preble defense is named after him, which is this is the Preble defense while we're here. Bit of trivia. The Preble defense is this amazing thing. C6 is named after him. Okay, Kasparov played d4. We have knight f6, c4, we have g6, we have a Grunfeld defense, and this has become really super theoretical as far as I can gather. Well, from what I've gathered generally, in that I think the Grunfeld defense nowadays, because of Peter Zvidler, has boosted massively in popularity, and there's many books on it, and it's very theoretical. But in this game we get a line which doesn't seem that complex to play out. There is a little finesse to it. So we have e4, it looks pretty standard so far. Knight f3, we have b6. I think the reason is this is a very rare bird move actually, b6. Usually c5 is played here, so this is very interesting actually that black played b6. We're talking over 5,000 games at least with the standard c5, about 600 of castles, but this is quite a rare bird at this point only a handful of games have seen b6. And white's thought to be better with this next move that Kasparov played, this interruption check. He interrupts black's potentially smooth development later if white was just leaving that alone with the knight maybe coming out to a5, c5. He takes away the c6 square. Black doesn't want to play knight d7. I think e5 is dangerous. Black doesn't want to do this necessarily because it's not too pleasant, and he doesn't want to move his bishop back because that's pointless, isn't it? Maybe we can just go here and say, look, what did you do b6 for? So black plays what seems to be the most normal looking move, c6, but it's taken away that c6 square from the knight. Bishop drops back, and now both sides castle, and black doesn't use the bishop b7 plan. In fact, I mean, maybe it's a reasonable move to play bishop b7. I'm not sure. It's it looks like a fairly, in a way it looks like a fairly standard Grunfeld, but it seems white's got a slight edge here, but it looks like Grunfeldy to me, and maybe the game could have played out like this. That was Engine's suggestion anyway. Play bishop b7 anyway. But black ventured bishop a6 instead. Bishop a6. Bishop a6. Interesting. Kasparov doesn't bother protecting the bishop. He actually takes on a6 and wins a tempo with queen a4 on the knight. Now, the knight could in fact retreat if it wanted, but actually it was protected by the queen, which might be slightly better. We have bishop g5, queen b7, rook fe1. Now actually with bishop g5, on this position, by the way, I was wondering earlier about bishop e7 here. I don't think there's any point to that, because black just takes on e4. So with this move, rook e1, bishop takes e7 is now threatened because of this tactic, this little tactic. So black makes a concession here. Well, it sort of looks like a concession. He plays e6. Why does he play e6? Why doesn't he just protect the pawn with the rook, you might ask? It's an alternative, but apparently e6 is okay. You could just protect as well. Okay, e6. We have rook ab1. Now rook ab1, I think it's trying to tie down black in this position. If it's an interesting move, rook ab1. Let me see, rook ab1. It's an interesting move. I mean, it's natural to put a rook there. It is a foul. Potentially, that's useful. That's staring at the queen like that. Black plays c5. In any case, black plays c5 as though he's not discouraged by anything. But this is really interesting. Kasparov claims, it's in my head what he said about this game, and I think I've also read it was in one of his books. He claims now that intuitively even though the opponent's like really like strong and everything, he just claims intuitively that d5, he's just thinking about the d pawn from this point in, the d pawn. It doesn't matter about the c3 pawn sack, it's all about the d pawn, because the queen's tied to a6, so we can't wipe out the d pawn. If we take that, we're just going to lose a6, right? But he is sacking for this d pawn. He is sacking c3 immediately. So would you say there's enough compensation? The D pawn has got support from either side of the board. Both sides of the board, not either. Both sides of the board seem to be supporting this D pawn. Would you say white has enough compensation? Does white have enough comp for the D pawn? He's sacked a pawn on c3. Do you think white's got enough compensation here? And there's a few other fascinating aspects, actually, of this position which strike me in reviewing it again. Okay, he moves his rook, which is supporting the D pawn, clearly, and the D pawn's got support from both sides of the board, yeah? So, what are we going to do with this D pawn? Well, black takes it for the moment. It's recharged. What is the threat? What is the threat immediately with D pawn? Maybe something like d6 to bishop e7 is useful. Okay, we have bishop g7. Now d6. So immediately, in fact, d7, it's got support from both sides of the board. d7, d8 just wins a rook, right? It wins a rook. d7 will threaten to win a rook. That's pretty serious. So black shields that diagonal, but here is super fascinating, because a move like f6 in lesser mortal games, you often find statistically that when players play moves like f6 and f5 at some point, or f2, sometimes that loses games just because of the weakness of the diagonal tactics that can sometimes generate, are sometimes negative because you've weakened your king sometimes. And it's interesting, this next move, in that it's it does tap into that theme in conjunction with the D pawn asset. There's a theme of the diagonal, that weakened diagonal, as well as the D pawn with this next move. They both come in concert to each other, these two ideas, the D pawn and black's slightly weakened king with f6. Now maybe a normal person's, well, I'm not going to say what a normal person's move is. What Kasparov to play, what white to play, what do you think Kasparov played in this position? The engine doesn't approve of it, but I don't know. Who cares? It's really good. If queen c4, sorry, that was mentioned. If queen c4, that's interesting. Queen f7 is possible. And if we take here, f takes, this might be okay for black because we've got nice pressure on f2 here. Now the engine suggestion is actually bishop f4, and it seems sensible, but maybe knight b4 is a slight snag with the idea of queen f7. If we kick this knight, are we wasting a lot of time? The knight would reroute potentially to a nice place, and if we're not careful, it starts to look okay for black with the knight on c6. So maybe there's a kind of positional emergency to stop this sort of business, the knight centralizing. Kasparov's move causes chaos. It's d7. So anyway, apparently black does best not to take the bishop here. Something like rook ad8 instead. And this might actually, black might survive to tell here. But he didn't do that. He played actually f takes g. We have here Check. Knight takes g5. Clearly this diagonal is dangerous and the d-pawn is dangerous. So both, as I say, both of these factors have come into cooperation. The d-pawn and the weakened diagonal. What's the threat? I mean, the threat's just immediately to win the exchange, otherwise we're going to have a smothered mate. For those of you, you must have seen this smothered mate before. For those of you that haven't, you get something like this position. There's a smothered mate, yeah? So black has to do something about that sort of thing. You're just going to lose the exchange. So black actually makes space for his king. He plays bishop f6. So he's able to answer now knight f7 check with king g7, and black would be fine because the bishop's also stopping the d-pawn as well as the two rooks. Black would be fine there. But the knight switches its attention to d8 with this next move, knight e6. Knight c7. Everything's covering, it seems, d8 at the moment. So why not just challenge the knight? We have knight takes f8, rook takes f8. Now the d-pawn is used as the basis for a threat now. Rook d6 threatening. Rook takes f6 to drag the rook away for d8. So rook takes f6 is on the cards. The bishop moves to e7. This might be a slight inaccuracy, it seems. Maybe better is bishop d8, apparently. But let's go with it. Bishop e7. And here, actually, the d-pawn gives itself up. We have d8. The d-pawn gives itself up. Bishop takes d8. Check. And now a nasty pin with rook d7, also threatening. Mate. Black defends with bishop f6. But now check that diagonal, that weakened diagonal. And here we have a very nasty move which guarantees white an advantage, a nasty advantage. And black really breaks down after this. White plays. Okay. White's playing. It's definitely an advantage for white after this next move. Even though at the moment it's like rook against knight and bishop. Black's also an extra pawn up. But can you see what okay, it's the penultimate white move here for the game. White to play in this position. It was actually queen f4. Now queen c5 is also mentioned by the engine, but it's only a small. It's not that hot, this position. Knight e6. This isn't that hot for white apparently. Can't be that equal and back's got past pawn here. No. It's actually queen f4. Looking at the knight over here, black cracks up here. He should play apparently bishop g7 and just let the knight go, which is miserable, and the exchange down. But apparently this is the only way to play it, the exchange down, which is pretty sad if that's the only way to play it. Rook f1, white's better. No, he just accelerates to the end here with queen a6. Yeah, he had to play bishop g7. It was doing something else of vital importance here, which is the clue for the final move of this game. White play and black resigns. 20 seconds. What does white play here? And black has to resign. Yeah, not taking the knight. This is not good enough because black is the exchange down here, but black fights on here. Fights on. The exchange down. No, no, no. You just finish black off here. Forget taking the knight. Queen h6. Yeah. Look how, in 2 games at least, we've got Kasparov's king going in quite close proximity to the opponent's king. Sort of trying to deliver mates on h7 in every game. And this makes me feel less guilty because often in bullet chess I'm trying to deliver mate on h7 or something. It's just a more sophisticated version, obviously, of my bullet chess. I'm looking at a grander version of my bullet chess here when I look at Kasparov game. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. No, but there is something direct and aggressive eventually you see in Kasparov's play, the way he finishes off opponents. He is going near to their king, obviously, but the great sophistication around this game cannot be ignored. About the d pawn, about sacking the c pawn, getting that d pawn, the bishop sack to weaken that diagonal, having this rook versus knight and bishop, horrible pin, putting pressure on the pin, switching over there for the final blow. It's a fantastic aesthetic. And when Kasparov talks about this game, he says that the central theme for him was that d pawn. So he believed in his own calculations, he believed in that initial pawn sack, the pawn on c3, he believed in all of this, but actually the d pawn did translate. He gave up the d pawn later for king safety. He switched it for king safety. So I thought these games, all 3 of them in the past, I'm not just saying this, but they have given me aesthetic pleasure in the past, and it's great to play through them again. It's like playing some good music from the 80s. Yes, and this is from the 80s. That's funny coincidence, isn't it? So comments, questions, likes appreciated on YouTube. Thanks very much, and see you next week for some more Kasparov games. Thanks for coming. Thanks very much.